Australia has officially become the first Western nation to attach themselves to the mantra of a cashless society, and with it, we see that so many different countries within the Western world will soon attempt to follow. We can see the fact that the United States, the European Union, Canada, and so many other countries have been talking about this for so long because it's just another standard of control that can be established so they can monitor you and make sure you are regulated even more to the point where you are stripped ever more of the value of your labor because they can tax you further by making sure that every single transaction you have in the economy is regulated and taxed further because they can track every single transaction because it's going to be through a digital system that they have constructed because they can control the value of the money, they control its process of how it's transacted through the economy, and they can control who spends it on what. Let's go ahead and jump into the nature of how Australia is jumping into the fact of being the first Western nation to attempt to go cashless. From Elijah Schaefer, breaking, Australia is the first Western nation to go completely cashless at major banks. WEF experiments on their plans for USA and EU ahead of 2024 elections. And that is so spot on, and we will be proving the fact that the World Economic Forum and many other global institutions are talking about the fact of, well, how valuable a cashless society would be, and then we have organizations like the Associated Press openly coming out and talking about the fact that institutions like this have never talked about the process of a cashless society, which I will be debunking in just a moment, don't you worry. So the thing is, this is a major threat to a free people to have any capacity to have liberty when it comes to the nature of their transactions in the economy, when you want to be detached from regulation from the state, because if they have a centralized digital currency that they can control the value, they can control everything about it, including how much of it you can use with the process of limiting your ability to buy specific things solely based on, I don't know, things like what's going on with these recent carbon taxes we're seeing in other countries that are going on in Europe, and now they're talking about being rolled out in Canada. And if you think that places like the United States will not have things like this, when we see massive bills like what happened with C-16 in Canada that was going after free speech, which eventually trickled down to the university system within the United States and became common culture here, if you think these things can't happen here, well then, I would argue you're a bit naive, but nonetheless, we've all been there before. So let's go ahead and jump in once more. We see from Rabbit Hole in response to what was going on to Elijah's comments. He says, completely cashless does sound convenient, less physical things to worry about. The trade-off is about less control in personal finance. If everything is digital, there is little to nothing stopping institutions from withholding your monetary assets. Cashless sounds like it would be a great way to set up a social credit system. That's absolutely true, but the thing that people really need to understand is that going into a cashless society is a way for the banks to make extreme amounts of money. So let's jump into how that would happen. Cashless sounds good until you see the fees. Banks love it. They get 1 to 4% per swipe. On cash, they get zero. $50 now is $50 in a year. We can hand it back and forth, no issue, no claim on a digital system. $50 run digitally after about 100 transactions is only roughly $20-ish left. Banks took the rest of the value literally out of the money itself. Good recipe for extra permanent inflation IMO. And I would argue this is a spot-on analysis. Let's go ahead, jump into this clip. Let's run it.
As ATMs and bank branches close and Australians increasingly rely on digital payments, one economist predicts the country will be cashless in the next few years. But there are fears a world without banknotes will leave people unable to pay for essential goods and become easy targets for cyber criminals.
No time for delay on the lunch rush.
Tap away when you're ready. Tap away when you're ready. Tap away when you're ready.
Cafe Pablo and Rusty's was one of the first businesses to axe cash. Now heavy hitters are on board, including KFC, Krispy Kreme and Nando's. Even Macquarie Bank is phasing out cash deposits and withdrawals.
We're definitely going to become a cashless society. It's better for consumers and it's better for businesses.
UNSW Professor of Economics Richard Holden says in 5 years we'll be functionally cashless unless the Reserve Bank acts even sooner.
We could say year one we'll get rid of the $50 bill, year two we'll get rid of the 20 and the 10, and year three we'll kind of mop up the small change. And that would give people time to adjust. For older Australians, it's going to be more challenging.
No, not cashless. Definitely not.
I don't even have a wallet anymore. Just use the phone, it's great.
We want to be able to do what we want with our money.
Sweden, the first nation to introduce banknotes back in the 1600s, was shaping up to be the first to get rid of them.
The demand from merchants and consumers that really decided the speed of this process.
But there was community backlash when people struggled to pay for essential goods, including the elderly and people living in areas with low internet.
We didn't see the problems in time.
Now trying to strike a balance.
New laws have come into operation, been forcing banks to have ATMs all over Sweden.
Lobby group Cash Welcome says it should serve as a cautionary tale for Australia.
Millions of Australians trust and rely on cash every day.
And it comes without the data breaches, scams and tech failures of digital payments.
Because it's not reliable. As soon as there's a flood, as soon as there's a fire, as soon as there's an internet outage, nobody can spend.
Whether you use cash or not, there's no question it's getting harder to access. In the past financial year, 11% of the nation's ATMs closed. Despite this, Aussies still withdraw $8 billion in cash every single month. No doubt some will need convincing.
I guess the tooth fairy's going to go digital.
Annalise Bolt, 9 News.
The Economist talks about the fact of how good it is that we're going to be moving into a cashless society because it's just better for consumers. Well, it depends on the framework of how you're looking at this. And also, I would really like to know what school of thought he comes from. Does he come from the Keynesian school of thought? Is he that of the libertarian mindset when it's more of the Austrian school of analysis? Or is he going to be coming from that of the Chicago school, which you don't really hear much about the Chicago school of thought when it comes to economics much anymore. But nonetheless, I digress. What we need to talk about is the fact that this has already been ramping up consistently when it comes to the nature of detaching ourselves from cash. And we see right here, this is from Kevin Sorbo. He says, this is terrifying. And this is a woman paying for an item at Whole Foods with a chip that is in her hand. This poor thing has no idea the future she has signed herself up for.
I'm at Whole Foods and I'm about to pay for my groceries with my... That's the coolest thing ever.
That is the most dystopian thing ever. Moving on, we see from James Melville, he says, Vanda Shiva pulls no punches in this commentary. She calls out the cashless society, social credit systems, the WEF, Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, and the Great Reset. If there was ever a time for humanity to wake up, now is that time. We're going to be jumping into this in just a moment, and I've heard her make commentary on multiple different things, talking about the history of India abandoning cash and how it's completely destroyed their society, which I have an article that I will have linked in the description down below if you would like to go jump into that, where you can look into the fact that India got rid of cash in 2016. Just type it in and you'll be able to find multiple different articles talking about what has happened afterwards, why it happened, the ramifications from the multiple different spurious conflicts that this has caused. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into this clip.
You know, my country was the first where they made cash illegal. 2016, digitalization was forced on the country. 8 o'clock in the evening announced midnight, cash was illegal, the big notes. And 70% of the economy crashed. This digitalization is now going all over the world, and there's a war on cash. They call it war on cash because cash is merely a medium of exchange. It has no value in itself. It's just a promise. You read the dollar note, it says, I promise to pay the bearer. When it's digital, even a credit card, you know, you're giving rents to the global financial system. But when it's cryptocurrency in the hands of algorithms, in the hands of big tech, they will do what is happening in China. Create social credit system to decide a new caste system. And you might have also followed that while all this has been happening, the founder of the World Economic Forum did a book called The Great Reset on how to deal with the COVID crisis. And everything we're seeing unfold is part of that Great Reset. But an element of that Great Reset is you will own nothing. Now, I'm a believer in the commons, and it would be so good if all land was a commons, if all seed was a commons, if food was a commons, if health was a commons, so that we had strong public health systems, strong community health system, deep knowledge about being healthy. But when Klaus Schwab says, you will own nothing, he's saying we'll own it all. That's why you have Gates, not just owning the seed, wanting to own our food. One, of course, controls the health, and now owning land. This, if ever there was a time for humanity to wake up, now is the time.
She's absolutely spot on. Everyone's catching strays that needs to. Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, the governments that are willing to push on CBDCs and cashless societies to push centralized digital currencies onto the people who are existing within these once free societies, which will no longer be free if they can institute this. Know that once this happens, if they can remove cash as a value asset, and they can make sure that they can track every single transaction in the economy, there is no such thing as freedom anymore. It's over. It's done. What we need to understand is we will go the same route of places like India. 50 days of pain. What happened when India trashed its cash? When Prime Minister Modi suddenly banned most of India's cash on November 8th, he warned that difficulties could persist for 50 days. The payoff, he said, would be less corruption and less tax evasion. So let's go ahead and touch on that last part, less tax evasion, which as an American and as an anarchist, I'm not a fan of taxes in the first place, period. But the thing that we need to talk about is this is just another metric of making sure that the government, which is just the largest mafia in existence, can get their fair share. Alrighty, what we see here is COVID-19 is speeding up Australia's shift towards a cashless future. This was written on December 21st, on the 25th. No, December 25th, 2021. My apologies. So, Christmas. And what we need to actually understand is, while COVID-19 was the accelerant and it was nothing more than a catalyst, it was the thing that the Australian government used as an excuse to push themselves towards this standard. Australia's transition to a cashless society raises concerns about financial exclusion, privacy, and safety. And this is the same exact mindset that I have because I'm concerned about the nature of what will happen with my privacy and anything that I'm actually going to be spending my money on. Because anyone that wants to make sure that they have any bit of detachment from the state and any bit of freedom when it comes to their ability to orient themselves through the economy and have a little less regulation than before, well, if they can track every single transaction that you have, then there is no possibility of escaping regulation because everything will be regulated to the nth degree, even more so than it already is now. And what we see is a cashless society good for America? From Forbes. And the reason I want to touch on this is because we can see that it's not just being talked about in Australia. It didn't just happen in India. We can see that it's also happening in the EU, where they're talking about doing this, having a digital euro. They're talking about this in places like Canada with the Canadian dollar. This is from the bankofcanada.ca. These are all from the government websites of these different institutions. Here we see the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System in the United States talking about CBDCs. And here we see the AP. Video doesn't show World Economic Forum speaker calling for a cashless society because, as we know, the Machiavellian institutions like the World Economic Forum would never do such a thing. That's absolutely ridiculous, except they have an article right here saying the benefits of a cashless society because they are absolutely trying to push you towards these standards. Do not fall for it because the moment that we fall for the nature of the CBDC and we lose our ability to orient ourselves freely in the economy is the day that we lose all of our liberty. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. Everything will be linked in the description down below. Go ahead and check out all of these articles if you are willing. Thank you for watching and spending your time checking out this video. Stay lovely, stay great. Thumbs up if you liked it. Thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Peace out.